there, ladies. Welcome to Joyful Homemaking. We are thrilled to be back. We've taken a short little hiatus, which I always think, should I even mention that? Because I know some of our faithful listeners might know, but others might be catching back up and you're like, oh, you did? Surprise, we did. We took a few week break. And during that time period, things are happening, right? Things are going down. And today's topic and conversation really is stemming from those events that have transpired just in the last week. But Ashley, I'm so glad to be back and chatting with you.
Yay, I know. I'm excited about this. I know it's funny because, we took a hiatus because there was just no way that we could figure out a time to podcast together. And now that I think back on it, I'm like, what was I doing? What were we doing? Like, there was something going on. I don't remember. I don't recall, but we've been busy. There's just always so much, which is good. It is the good work that has been prepared beforehand for us to be doing is what we're doing. So now we're doing the good work of podcasting. So, Marissa, would you like to fill us in on
I would
what
love to.
you have been thinking about lately? And there's been, all sorts of different I guess we should say the topic of the podcast that we would like to talk about is trials. Trials of various kinds. Yeah. So you've had all sorts of different trials over the last week.
Definitely in this last week, multiple trials. And I was just thinking, like, as I was sharing some of our trials, which I will share here on the podcast with others, everyone kind of just piped up like that they have experienced something similar, either currently or in the past. And it just got me thinking that our life is definitely not void of trials. There is always trials. There are always conflicts. There are always these things that come up. And if we're not equipped, both biblically and or experientially, about how to deal with these things in a Christ-minded way, then it can actually add this like layer of turmoil in our lives. And instead of looking at it as turmoil, we can look at it as, an opportunity to point our hearts, direct our hearts and our families' hearts and those watching us have this conflict back to Christ. So I really do think that this conversation is going to be really uplifting, whether you're currently in a trial or guess what, you're going to experience a trial. Bummer, right? Like it's coming. So this is great tools to have in our toolbox, but I digress and progress to tell you that just a few days ago, actually, we found out that my husband was being laid off from his full-time remote job. And this was definitely a surprise. We were not expecting it. And I remember when I was about to leave with my daughter, we were going to see a musical together. My husband got this call and it was like, it's PM on a Friday night. Like, why would your boss call you at that time for any other reason, right? And so he went into the library, actually where I'm sitting, and took the call. And then he came out and he just looked like same expression, same face, everything. And I was like, who is that? Why are they calling you? And he's like, well, I've just been laid off. And I'm like, poker face, like present. You ready? I was really surprised in that moment, the peace that I felt hearing a devastating news like this, and how we're going to talk about how helpful that is to our family dynamic and to our husbands when we have a different mindset, a different perspective when we hear news like that. That's the big whammy. And then the next day, I had like 4 throwing up kids. I'm like, Lord, I thought I had enough. Why are we doing this? It was like, okay, like when it rains, it pours. But in all of these things, it is good. It is good to learn how to deal with those trials within your heart and within your family. So, Ashley, there's my news. It's public. It's out.
It's public. Everyone knows. I will say, I just walked with a couple people through, I don't know, it's hard. You don't want to classify people's trials as minimal or major trials, right? Like you would think of a job loss as a major trial. There's just different but you hate to layer it. Like it's going to be different for every person. Like what might seem like a small financial setback to somebody else might actually be like the equivalent of them losing their job, or they're not able to make their mortgage, or you just never know, or illnesses. Like there's so many, it's hard to say. Some are major, some are minor. But yeah, just walking with different friends through more shorter term trials, I guess I should say. And then also just having on my heart and getting updates all the time from church family that has more long term trials, that there's just a lot of unknown. And those are more like long term illness. And I don't know. God is so good to encourage us through seeing other people have joy in their trials. And that's so, like the verse in James, count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds. And I think we think of joy. It's not like Darren came out of the library and said, yay, I lost my job. Hooray. Like that's not the joy, but that's like what the world thinks of as joy, right? It's just like kind of like the cheerleader attitude, but that's not true joy. True joy is exactly what you're explaining, having the peace. Like the peace that God is going to take care of you, the peace that like he has actually sent us this trial for our benefit, which is really hard to look at it as a blessing. But I think it's actually like the more trials we go through, the more we see the Lord using those to sanctify us. And of course, that verse goes on, count it all joy when you meet trials of various kinds, for you know the testing of your faith produces steadfastness, and let steadfastness take its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. And you're like, that's what sanctification is, right? It's like that movement of holiness toward the day that God will make us perfect in him on the other, when we're in glory. And so to think that like trials are actually moving us closer to heaven in a way, like they're progressing our sanctification. And so that when you sort of like, you kind of nail it on the trial, you're like, okay, I had the peace, I had the joy, like God was so good. Well, not of myself. God was so good to give that to me. But then you also are like, oh, what's next? And then, like you said, then you wake up the next day and you got some pukers. And I had a couple other friends who went through, like I said, just some sort of bump in the road trials that are a big deal when they happen, but they'll be resolved. And one of them was a financial setback. And she looked upset when I was talking to her about it. She had just found out about it. And she just said, but God will provide. God will provide. And she's been through trials before. She's told me about them. She's seen God's hand providing for her family each time. And so that's just built up that muscle and is sanctifying her. And so I just think, so as you're talking about like how we react to trials, us personally, like we have, it's with the joy and the peace of the Lord. And again, that's not from ourselves, but that's from him. So, and I'm sure that was a huge help to Darren for you to not freak out in that moment and burst into tears and go, what are we going to do? You had that peace. And so what a help for your husband in that time.
Definitely. And it was, like you said, different trials prepare you for the next trial, right? And sometimes the trial, even if you handle it well in the beginning, it's a continuation of a trial. It's not just like a trial for one day. It's, the next day is the same trial is continuing and you're still trying to overcome and find, peace through Christ in all of these things. And I was blessed, and not to toot my own horn at all, but like sitting at the dinner table 2-3 nights later when we were all finally feeling better, Darren was able to express like how that helped him. We really try to be intentional with our children to be like, do you see this reaction? Do you see how that transpired? That is like a teachable moment. Not that is why we do it, but that we are intentional when we do things, that we pointed out. He got all like choked up and it was telling kids, and I was like, and I'm like continuing. I'm like, we're okay, no crying, but he meant it in a, an endearing type of way. And Ashley has been the benefactor of several of my husband's choked up moments when.
And then it makes me cry, and he's so sweet. Yeah.
Oh, he is. Well, so I tried to write down 10 different practical ways, just in reflection about my situation, and other people obviously sadly also go through trials, and the things that I've learned from them. So I've written down like 10 practical ways how to embrace a trial biblically, especially as a wife and as a mother. And I think that obviously wife first, and we talk about that all the time here on the podcast, and that we are doing everything we do unto the Lord and for his glory. But that relationship with our husband, that team that we make as a family of husband and wife, is really a game changer. And so obviously wife in trial is very important. But also, as we are also mothers, most of us listening here on this podcast and me in this situation, we have eyes looking, watching, and their hearts are being either mended and felt safe in the Lord, or we are instilling fear and anxiety and worry. We also are training by our actions. What we do is training them for their future spouse and their future kids and their future trials, because they're coming, as we said. Ashley, if you are okay with it, I was thinking we'd just go through the 10. We've already said most of them, so some of them can be just like an echo of what we've said, but how these different practical things that we can have in our minds, in our hearts, can help us in any trial, not just the big ones, like you said, not just the little ones. And honestly, I like when this trial happened, when losing a job, which is our full-time income, which is how we afford to live, I did not have fear over the job. I was like, we can just move back in the trailer. Darren's like, I'm not ready for that. That's usually my line, is I'm not ready for that. But all that to say is my instant like personal reflection was like, there could be way worse trials than this. I was like, something, like something could happen to our child, or we someone like a death. That's where my head went. And perspective is good, but that doesn't negate the trial that you personally are feeling or someone else is feeling. Every trial is need to be met with, a biblical approach, and every trial can be hard for that individual. There's not a comparison game here. We're not trying to outdo each other in our trials.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're so right about perspective. And yeah, like you're not comparing, because the comparison game can get real dangerous real fast. But just having that perspective of, even if you are going through a major trial, people have gone through major trials before, right? So that's why I think it's really important to know history correctly, and also to read lots of missionary biographies. Because just knowing the stories of the saints that have gone before and things they have endured, it really does help put a good perspective. So I think that's a really good point.
No, that is so wise. I didn't even think of that in my practical tips. So number 1 of 11, because I'm adding that one, gain a right perspective. And I think that's so good, because I think also in that right perspective mindset, not only does it help you in your current trial, but also it helps you gain compassion for others experiencing trials, both in encouragement to that person, but also we do need to remember that what our friends are experiencing is hard for them. Maybe we experience quote unquote harder, but that is not true. Christ-like love is to be like, well, I've gone through this, so you'll be fine. No, it's meeting them where they're at, meeting and carrying their burden with them. So that's so wise. Okay. Number 2, sorry. Number 1 on my list.
Yeah, sounds good.
And this is actually, I wrote this down and I was like, God is so good and so crazy, but pray for your husband. And didn't we just do like a podcast 2-part thing on praying for our husband, and praying for his work was one of them, I remember. But just praying in that situation, as men and our husbands are the leader, the provider, and the protector. So when he experiences something like a job layoff, like I personally was like, it's not on me. I'm no stress on me. I'm not the provider, but what I am is the helpmate. And how to strengthen him in that walk is to commit to pray for him in that moment, in the moments after. I mean, Darren probably will be applying for jobs for some months now, And so like, it's easy when a trial first happens to focus all of your, helping, your praying, all the things in that moment. But it's that long term. I remember I talked to a widow, a friend of mine, and she said that she felt so cared for in the beginning, but it was the sequential months that got harder. Oh, and maybe that's a call to all of us believers, is as in the body, we can't care for everyone, but in our body, we should remember that, like, the trial, they are getting a lot of attention right in that moment, but it's the longevity of committing to prayer and committing to check in. And it is a weight, right? It's that carrying the burden. It's heavy because it's heavy on your soul. It's heavy in like your commitment to help those people. But I don't know, isn't that so timely about our prayer podcast?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the funny things that Doug Wilson quote is when he talks about, because I don't know, oftentimes when people go through a trial, we feel like if we can't do something tangible, if all we say is like, I'll be praying for it, somehow it doesn't feel like enough. And his quote was that when people say, well, all we can do is pray now for that person. And he said, has it really come to that? When it's like, that should actually be the first thing we're doing, right? But sometimes it's like the last resort. You're like, I brought them a meal. I cleaned their home. I did this. I did that. And it's like, have you gone to the Lord in prayer for that person, the person going through the trials, or for your own trial, or, the one that you and your husband are facing together, whatever it may be. So yeah, so I think it's really important that you bring that up, because sometimes it honestly can like slip our minds, or we feel like prayer is somehow not a good enough thing to be doing for somebody, which is, of course, just a lie of the enemy. So yeah.
Yeah, so good. Okay, the next one, I love that you already brought this up, but we can encourage our hearts and we can encourage our husbands' hearts and our whole family in scripture. Like, where better way to go? What better way to express what our heart perspective should be than the word? And you brought up the verse I was totally thinking, in James, are going to totally experience trials. They are coming if they are not here already. And why should we look at trials as something that is harmful to us when we could look at it as something that is building our muscles, And I was just thinking, because I was talking to a friend about strength, weight training, and I do it more. But, what is the point of weight training if it's not to tear down, to break down so that you can build up, right? Like, you're going to be stagnant if you don't do it, right? If you're not pushing your body, you're not pushing your muscles, you're not going anywhere. And sometimes in our like complacency mindset, we can be like, oh, everything's good how it is. But we are here for just a short mist, right? In this perspective of life. And if we are content with being complacent and just stagnant, then we really have a heart condition. And honestly, if that is how you feel, be warned. I am not prophetic, but the trials are coming to help you get out of that spot.
Yeah, do not let that muscle atrophy, because, well, yeah, you're absolutely right. If you're just letting, you just try to let the trials go by without working that muscle, like we talked about, then it's going to be painful. Yeah, and I love that you bring up scripture too, because so I like to talk to my kids about count it all joy, and we always joke a lot about like, okay, what was meant by count it all joy? Like, and Paul tells us also to be joyful, and so it's like, oh dear, I'm connecting.
It's okay.
Okay, sorry. But I will say to my kids, like, say there's like a petty trial, like, so I'll say something like, You know what? We're supposed to count it all joy when we're shipwrecked, when we're beaten, when people make false accusations against us, you know, when our bowl of ice cream wasn't as big as everybody else's. And of course, my kids are always like, ah, so then they kind of like roll their eyes and laugh. And the other day, I don't remember what was happening, but something silly happened. And Judah says to me, Mom, count it all joy. And I was like, yes, like they get it, you know, like they're starting to say it back to me now. So anyway, so I just think, yeah, the more you're just getting scripture into your kids' hearts and minds now, and then have them repeat it back to you, like what a blessing. So yeah.
Oh, I love that. We
Yeah.
do that. Scripture is good. It is good. Number 3, I struggle with, but in the moment, I think it is super, super important, especially when information is coming to you, but to be a listening ear. I know that for females, particularly, that people that I have found and myself like to voice, like process, right? I'm going to process by just auditorially talking to you right now. And sometimes that is what's needed. But usually when a trial first happens, or especially if our husband's coming to us to like communicate what they're feeling, like their download, just to be that listening ear, just to listen and to receive what they are thinking without having to process out loud back to them. Like take a moment, make sure that they're able to communicate what they're feeling so that you can really, again, use all of these things that we've already talked about. Commit to pray for their hearts and how they're feeling. Encourage them with scripture that goes with what their thought process is. And if you need someone like a sounding board to like process through your feelings, just Marco Polo Ashley, because I think I met her like
That's what we do.
that, you know, biblical friend will encourage you so that you can encourage your husband. And it doesn't mean that we shouldn't talk to our husbands, right? Or it doesn't mean that we shouldn't find a time to voice like our concerns about things, but just in that moment, especially the initial moment, like really focus on being that listening ear, and that holding of the tongue. Same in James about that tongue. That holding of the tongue will really help you to not unintentionally cause additional anxiety or worry, you know, as you're processing.
Yes. Oh, I think that's so true. And I think it is important to remember that like it's okay. We women we don't do this, we talk over each other, but it's okay to sit in silence for a minute. Like it took me literally years and years of marriage to realize, like, if it's silent, it doesn't mean that he doesn't have something to say. It's just that he doesn't need to use all the words I do. So he just is thinking about the wisest way to sum things up. And I actually have realized, like, my oldest son does this too. So it's like, if I'm talking to him, I need to just give him a second to process what I'm saying. And then he'll give me a wise answer back instead of me just, blah, 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 you know? So, yeah, I think listening, what a good reminder.
That is so fun to see it now in your son. Like you got to practice through your husband, and now that blessing is getting to him. I love it. That's so cool. Well, the next one is so funny. It's kind of like the opposite of listening, but not really. It's speaking words of life. I think that when we listen, we hopefully can use wisdom like our husband and Ashley's oldest son uses by giving back appropriate words, being careful with the word vocabulary that we choose, the tone that we use, the many words, you know, in a situation, especially in a trial, can be something that can, like I mentioned, add anxiety, add stress. So when I found out, wanted to ask a million questions. Like I had all the questions in the world. They were rattling on in my head. And I just chose to wait and use my words carefully, and use my words powerfully, I should say. Because if I chose to say something like, well, what are we going to do? That is not going to be uplifting or helpful in that moment, right? But instead, I choose to say words like, the Lord will provide, you know, like, and uplift him. Like, you are an amazing, amazing provider for this family. We are going to be fine. you are going to find something. And I think not, I know a lot of people talk about like manifesting, which I don't really get the whole thing because I don't understand it. Rightfully so. I think that it's been taken to the woo woo place, you know, but speaking words of life-giving words that are truth and that are found in the Bible, I don't believe it's manifesting. I just believe it's encouraging, right? Like just speak out what you see and what you know to be true. And those words do hold power. What do you think, Ashley?
Yes, I completely agree. And I think if you don't know what to say, which does happen, I mean, sometimes somebody goes through something or they tell you some news or something, and it's just that moment of you have no idea what to say. There is, I think, in that situation, instead of trying to find the right words, just say, "Can I pray for you right now?" And then just, you know what I mean? Especially when it comes to, I mean, your husband and you may be talking through things or pray together or whatever it is, but especially if it's a friend. I mean, we had a friend, again, who went through a trial, and it was, we all found out about it at co-op. And so I had been trying to help her out, and I went inside and I kind of shared with another friend. I mean, it was not the type of thing that you couldn't tell somebody, but anyway. And so I went inside and I told another friend, and the other friend, she just went, "Oh no, oh no." And then she just started praying, and we all just bowed our heads and started praying together, you know? And it was like, that was kind of the thing. Cause it's like, how are we going to help the situation by standing there talking through it or talking about it? And so we just bowed our heads and prayed. And I just think it was such a good example to me too, of what to do in a trial. If you don't know what to say or what to do, bow your head and start praying. You know, no one is going to say, well, maybe if they're not a believer or if they're really against it, but very few people are going to say, "Stop praying. I don't want you to pray for me right now." You know? So, I think that is encouraging. And like you said, speaking words of life when you're speaking to the Lord and asking for his will and his help. So, yeah.
That's brilliant. Oh, I love that. I love the body of believers. And I really do believe that even not, unbelieving people, if you ask, "Can I pray for you?" I have never heard anyone say no, but rather I've seen my unbelieving friends ask for prayer and good thoughts, when trials come, because we know that there's comfort in that, like we're in God's image. We know that's what we should be doing.
So true. Yeah.
Okay. Number 5, halfway. I think, and I kind of, they all intertwine together, but like show, like physically, and make that commitment, show unwavering support. You are a team. In my case here, in talking about the job layoff, we are a team, and that support, that you're going to stand with your partner no matter what. I was listening to a podcast about family business, I think, or starting a business or something like that. And the husband said, he says, the only way to be successful in entrepreneurship is to have a spouse who is supporting you. Like, I was just correlating to that, to our position as helpmate. Wow. Like, I don't even get how people are like, "Well, don't be a doormat. Don't do all these things," because our position is so powerful that we are instilling encouragement. We are instilling strength into our husband by being the support that he needs so that then he can go and do his role. I think that, the unwavering part is a challenge to me right now, to remember every day, how can I be that support as the days continue growing from that first news,
Yeah. Yes. Such a good point. Yeah. And there's a lot of ways to do that too when it's a friend going through a trial also, right? I mean, just thinking about this last Friday, my friend had to suddenly leave our co-op, and I just called and I said, "I'm just taking your kids to my house. Like, you guys come over for dinner when you're ready, but they're just coming over," and it was like, "Oh, well, no, we don't." And I was like, "You know what? They're just going to come over. It's fine. Like, I'm not trying to be pushy, but I'm taking your kids." So yeah, just unwavering support. That was what it was. So yeah.
You are so good at that too, Ashley. And I think that as your girls specifically see you doing that, it's a multiplying effect, right? Like, you have 2 girls, they see their mom doing this, and then what they have and the influence that they'll have. It's so cool to see that growing faith and biblical
Yeah.
community. I love it. All right, number 6. This one I wrote down, and I definitely believe it can go with any trial, but specifically I saw it play out in ours about encouraging his faith, encouraging your husband's faith. I know that when trials come, sometimes, and I wouldn't say in our trial, but other people I've seen, like if a trial like a death or an illness or something really life altering happens, a lot of people can become angry at God or ask those questions, why, and sometimes you never get an answer. But in this case, for us, it happened on that Friday night. And so we had Saturday to process it. And then Sunday, I stayed home with the kids, but Darren was on worship team and he went to church. And I just said, go find some, biblical men that you can just let them know what's going on so that they can be in prayer and check in with you. And his faith was so bolstered by the biblical community. Like they stopped and prayed with him. They've been checking in with him like every day. Like encouraging your husband's faith, both you and use that biblical community, and like you guys did at co-op, everyone prayed, or if you have a friend going through a trial, like you're so good to bring up, like check their heart condition, like do they need to express some worry that they're having or concern or doubt so that you can uplift them and encourage them back with scripture and prayer and all the things before.
Yeah. Yeah. And that can be especially a tricky one with a friend who is maybe is letting the trial. And I mean, there are some really hard things, right? Like you think about like a cancer diagnosis or something like that. I mean, we have, just people I think of in the body that, I mean, I've been so encouraged by how joyful and positive and peaceful they are because of their faith. But I know that not every person that gets a diagnosis, even as a believer, is going to have that reaction. And so it can be a little bit tricky sometimes being like, well, just count it all as joy. Just like God's in control. And like all of these things, yes, they're true, but yeah, that can be hard. So I think like you're saying, maybe just digging a little bit deeper and trying to figure out where their heart condition is, like maybe what they really need to do is to read through a book of the Bible with you and do a study, or you need to check in and say, hey, do you want to get on the same reading plan and be partner? There's so many different things. I think of even my daughter's in like a prayer group with a group of girls, and they meet together on Fridays, but then they also have like a text thread with all of our phones. So it's like, they like sign it or we sign it, like Eleanor's mom, like praying for you. But I just think, one of them's going through a really hard trial, and what she needs is this group of girls that are continually encouraging her, meeting with her, praying with her. And so, just like you're saying, what is that person's heart condition, and how do you help encourage their faith specifically? So, yeah.
Because like you brought up in the beginning, it's all about that. It's all about our faith and growing and being sanctified. And so not miss that opportunity. Number 7, I am really bad at the first part and getting better at the second part, but I think they go together. I said, remain patient and trust God. Sometimes we want an answer right away. We want to fix it right away. We want something to be done and moving on past this trial, but some trials just take a while. And to trust God in that trial, to trust God, and not in a prosperity way, like in our case, where like we're gonna, he's lost this job so that we can make more money, like, I mean, if the Lord decides that, I'm not be sad, but let more people know. But really just be patient and to wait on the Lord, and does that mean, in our case with the job layoff, does that mean, not working? No. What that means in my mind, to have patience and trust the Lord, is to not do it on our own strength, but to do it in the strength of the Lord. Like we are not meant to fix everything. We are not meant to have all the answers, but in these trials, as we wait and pray and submit and surrender what we have to him, we grow in sanctification, and we, as we trust, we have that peace like we talked about earlier, that peace that people shouldn't have. You shouldn't have this kind of peace. My dog's trying to come in.
Okay. My dog's been barking at who knows what, so sorry.
She wants the peace of Christ is what she wants. But yes, so good. Okay, number 8. They go together. I mean, like I said, I'm not good at making lists. This
Well,
is
this
not my
is amazing. This is so great. I love it. You're so organized.
trying to be. Maintain a spirit of peace and joy. I think that and to do that, we've talked about before here on this podcast, is when you have an attitude of gratitude, right? When you have Thanksgiving in your life, then that peace and that joy becomes the outcome. It becomes the fruit of your thankfulness. Perspective, thankfulness, gratitude. Someone today, there's like this blessing, I forget what it's called. There's mercy offering at church, and they're like, "Oh, you should, ask for some support from the church." And I was like, "Oh, thank you, maybe." But then I just kept thinking, "But I'm so blessed. I'm so blessed. Why do I need this?" But that's my perspective. It's just like there's so many blessings in life, and but this trial is a blessing, even though I hate saying that. You know what I mean? It is a blessing. We will, and maybe that dependency on the church body is part of the blessing that we are going to witness and see and be part of. And so, not to say don't do the mercy offering or the mercy support thing, but use your biblical community, but just maintain that peace and that joy. And you do that through Thanksgiving.
Mm-hmm. Yes, for sure. And I would say, just to kind of, I was thinking about trials, and I have been, on the giving end and the receiving end of having my own trials and having people and I had some long-term physical things, and there were some people that did help me out continually for months because of physical trials I was facing. And at the time, like, I felt so terrible. Like, I felt guilty when people would help me or do things. But being on the giving end of that, it is actually a blessing to bless other people. Like, sometimes I think, like, of course, we are more blessed. It's more blessed to give than to receive. I mean, that it truly does feel that way so often when you're able to bring somebody a meal or to go clean a house for somebody. Like, there is so much blessing in that. And so I think, and this is not to speak to your specific circumstance, because of course you guys have to figure out financials and everything and whether or not that would be something you would want to do. If you're sick in bed and somebody says, "Can I bring you a meal?" and you're like, I don't want to put them out. Like, I don't want them to have to go through that. Let them bless you. That's going to be a blessing to them. So anyway, that's just my encouragement and what I learned in that time. So yeah.
Words of wisdom right there, girl. Good job. The next two we've talked about. The first one, number 9, lead by example. And I was just thinking about this in our family dynamic. Like, we are setting the tone for our family, especially our kids watching, and our husbands don't need to carry that weight on top of all the other weights that they have in our situation, but also lead by example in trusting God and displaying your faith and resilience and patience in your own trials, so that encourages other people when they do experience trials as well. And I've seen you do that before, Ashley, in your physical trial that you were saying before. Like, it's so funny. I remember your physical trial, and then at the same time, I'm like, when was that? Like, I can't remember, because you just have this joyful dependence on the Lord the whole time that you're like, was that a short period? Was that a long period? I mean, you know what I mean? It's your disposition and your attitude where, like, I feel like some instances, some trials, you can like pinpoint like that moment, but it didn't change who you are. It didn't change your message. It just enhanced it by your joyful reliance on the Lord in that example you set.
Well, praise God. I mean, that's the thing. It's like, it's really easy. Hindsight's 2020, right? That's what people always say. Like, it's so easy to look back and see clearly, like, well, God was teaching me so much in that time. Like, I learned so much through that. But when you're in the middle of it, like you said, oh dear. Are you still there? Oh, there you are.
Sorry.
It's so hard to be patient, especially when it's something that you don't know the outcome, or you don't know how long it will last, or you don't know. Yeah, you just don't know. And so anyhow, but so it's hard in the middle, but it is so easy. It's so much easier to look back and think, like, God was so faithful, and I see everything that he was teaching me now through that. So anyway,
Perfect.
So yeah, praise God that we can be an encouragement when we go through trials, right?
Yeah. Yes. And that's the point of this podcast, right? Is so that we can inspire, encourage others. So it's so good. Okay, the last one. I put it the last, not because it should be last, but I'm just thinking of some examples that I might turn red. So if you're watching YouTube, you'll notice what things I struggle with saying out loud. But to love him unconditionally. I think that love obviously is displayed in a numerous amount of ways. But sometimes when women, especially when we are worried or we're concerned about something, that intimacy factor that we feel like we desire. Oh no, I got to baby.
We have a guest.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, these are gloves. Annie eating them. When we I think our husbands in particular, if we're talking about husbands in this situation, but also, kids and physical touch, but our husbands need that additional.
Sorry, we're distracting each other by waving.
Our husbands need that additional physical touch during these trials, yeah, connect us in a way that doesn't maybe make sense, but I think it gives them so much security, when we give them that additional boost.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that is a very good point. Yeah. And it can be easy to start getting frustrated or impatient if maybe like you feel like things aren't going the way that they should in a trial, or you feel like your husband's not doing, there's so many ways that we can get into our sinful attitudes. But yeah, to remember that we're here to serve, right? We're here to help. And
well, Ashley, that's my list. That's my 10.
That was a great list. Thank you.
Do you want to quickly do what's cooking in your fam bam?
I am cooking a lot of chicken legs and 20 pounds of stew meat for I just bought all the meat yesterday. I cleared cash and carry out of chicken legs. I hope I have enough. I need 200 and I have to go get, more groceries today. So that's what I'm doing. I told my husband, I was like, there's going to be a lot of food around, but not really anything our family can eat. All of my refrigerators are going to be full, but it's all for Saturday night. So it'll be fun, and the kids are all so great. Even if dinner isn't amazing, they'll be sweet about it. So
it's gonna be amazing. You're an amazing cook, and I can't wait on the next podcast for you guys to give us the update on how the banquet went.
I know. I'm excited. So how about you? Are you guys chicken soup kind of slowly getting back into eating, or what's cooking over there?
Yeah, so I think what I wanted to share real fast is some information that people told me that in the moment when my family was, throw up sickness, I just didn't think of, because you're just like in like survival mode, whenever you need to do laundry and you're trying to clean and everything. One of the things that I was advised, and I would advise you, if anyone ever has sickness in a puking type of way, just to get a disinfectant and to wipe every counter, every doorknob, every because this virus, and we think it's the norovirus, it spreads by touching and then touching your mouth, so extra hand washing. Wash everything that is touched. Don't worry about dusting or, even sweeping for that matter. Just wipe everything that's touched, and open the windows. Open the windows for 20 minutes a day. Get some fresh air in there. Also, we put on all of our diffusers with a disinfectant essential oil. Yeah, just really trying to mitigate the ability to touch and to sick ourselves, because it's not a one and done illness.
Oh gosh, yeah.
But I don't know if that's
good advice. Good advice.
Yeah.
Lysol everything. Oh, such pretty earrings.
I know. She just wants to touch it all. But thank you for letting my guest come on here at the end.
Anytime. She could be a featured guest. Reoccurring, maybe. Hi, Glennie.
Probably.
Thank you.
Oh,
goodness. All right. Well, you got to go disinfect stuff. I got to go buy more groceries. We've got good works, so we got to go.
Love it. Awesome. Okay. Until next time.
Sounds good. Thanks, friend.